Al Baker, you were at the move of the Brookfield Depot last night. And let's just see. Do you have some photos that you could show us, Al Baker?
I have. I was not at the move itself. I was there for the final preparations when the last passenger train, and I think one of the last freight trains passed. And I will pop about 5 or 6 pictures up on the screen here. Okay, that's the depot all loaded up, ready to go. This was one of the last remaining Milwaukee Road depots in Wisconsin, still located on the railroad, built in 1867. And it's being moved about 350 feet to the southwest to a new location on the hill there, where they'll make it a coffee shop and possibly some retail there also. So that's the depot ready to go. The last passenger train to pass the depot was number 7, the Westmount Empire Builder. Here it is passing the depot. It was about 5 or 10 minutes late. There must have been about 15 fans there recording it, cameras and videos and whatnot. The 132 and the 56 there, and I see it's a very decent main line here. Shot of the Brookfield Station sign. And this is a 198. He was running pretty late. He normally goes through here in the late morning or early afternoon, sometimes even the early morning, but it's about 5 o'clock. And just after the train passed here, the track foreman put up red boards on either side of the depot. So I'm pretty sure this was one of the last trains to pass the depot here. And this is one last look at the depot. I guess it was moved last night, starting at 10 o'clock. The CP stopped traffic from 11 until midnight. And, as far as I know, the move went okay. So that's what I've got.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate that. All righty. So I think we're going to get started. Do you have anything, Keith? Dues, if you haven't paid your dues, Keith will accept your dues right now. We are going to have an auction here at the conclusion of our program as well. So anything else for the good of the order from the room? All right, Bryan Howell is our presenter. Bryan, do you want to unmute yourself and get ready? I think you should be about ready to go if you want. Bryan is a meteorologist with the National Weather Service in the Duluth Superior office. And he joins us via Zoom from his home in the Superior area. He's a past officer of the Burlington Route Historical Society, and he's here today to give us a presentation on dome cars along the Mississippi River. So let's give Bryan Howell a round of applause, please.
All right, I'll go ahead and get started. Thanks for having me tonight. I really enjoy talking about the CB. I've done this presentation a couple times now. If you were at Train Fest back in 19, I did this presentation there. A little different. I added some more photos, and I've got a bonus section in the presentation as well. Well, it focuses mainly on the Q's dome passenger trains along the river. I did add some information about the 37 Twin Cities Zephyr in there as well.
I don't think the presenter does.
But I just wanted to say quickly, thanks for having me. I looked around the room, saw quite a few familiar faces and names, and might even have a couple of the photographers in the audience today that have their photos in this presentation. So the Q built their line along the Mississippi River as where nature smiles 300 miles. And if you've ever driven along that portion of the river, they got it right. Both the Milwaukee and the Q had fantastic scenery to pass through between Chicago and the Twin Cities. If you've never had an opportunity to drive along the river, I highly recommend it. So this presentation is going to focus on trackage along the Mississippi River, Minneapolis, St. Paul, down to Savannah. And I was kind of surprised. It was a little difficult to find photos of the Empire Builder and the North Coast Limited along this portion of track, which was kind of surprising because the trains ran in daylight in both directions. I had no shortage of Twin Cities Zephyr photos. It seemed like most people didn't turn their cameras towards the non-Q trains, so to speak. So we'll start out first with the North Coast Limited, Seattle, Portland, Chicago via the Spokane, Portland, Seattle, Northern Pacific, and the Q. So I modeled about 1958, 1959, and 1965. So I used this summer 1960 timetable in the presentation just as kind of a basis for some of the timings of trains here. So we'll refer back to this timetable here quite a few times. So North Coast Limited, number 25 and number 26, westbound leaving Chicago just after noon at this time and arriving in Minneapolis about 7:40 p.m. And then the eastbound trip left Minneapolis at 6:15, arrived in Chicago at 1:45 p.m. So this is an example of one of the consists of the North Coast Limited. This was arriving at St. Paul on July 9, 1962. So this is St. Paul was where the Q and the Northern Pacific swapped power operating down to Chicago. It wasn't in Minneapolis. It was all done at St. Paul. And this is a bit of an expanded consist here. Now, this is a summer season, so it's a little bit bigger to begin with, but there's also extra foreign road cars. This is a tour group going to the World's Fair in Seattle, and they're stopping at Yellowstone along the way. And then if you notice there down at the bottom, Q silver chair, this was a parlor car. And this was for first class service between Chicago and St. Paul. Unless if you weren't traveling beyond St. Paul, you had to ride in what was called, well, at least on the Empire Builder, it was the shorts coach, but you didn't really have access to any of the higher fare amenities of the train. So in order to provide parlor service on this train, the Q inserted one of their parlor cars just on the westbound portion of the trip. And it returned eastbound to Chicago. It was on either Empire Builder or the Twin Cities. And then some of the people on this one transferring to sleeping cars on the Winnipeg, and they're out of parlor car. Usually the parlor car ran on the Empire, so it wasn't as often on the North Coast Limited. So it's probably more so for the tour group on this day. So here's another version, more condensed train. This was in the winter season, so it's not as busy. Now we've got the Q RPO behind the power here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we go. But got our selection of coaches and sleepers, the traveler's rest, dining car, and then the Q's observation car was on the tail this day. They had one observation car out of this. So we'll start diving into some of the photos here. This is in St. Paul looking up Westminster Hill. We've got the North Coast Limited arriving into St. Paul from Minneapolis on the left. And I like this shot because you've got a Q freight right up the hill as well. Probably transfer to the GN or the NP heading up the hill. This is July 1965. Here we are at the east side of St. Paul Union Depot. We are preparing to depart. This is June 1964. And one thing I'd like to point out is the mail car behind the water, the RPO car behind the water baggage car. The Postal Service took most of the mail contracts off September 1967, but the Northern Pacific continued to keep this car in the consist because it was it contained the dorm space for the dining car crew, and then they used that extra RPO space for express service as well. And here we are westbound south of St. Paul. This is along the track, the Milwaukee Road. This is in June 1964. Then we jump down to La Crosse. This is Grand Crossing. Boy, does this scene look different today. You've got the road overpass, the Q, now BNSF, is double track. A lot busier of a intersection now than it was even then, and it was pretty darn busy back then. But I like to point out here, this is Q's RPO. This was either Silver Page or Silver Post in most instances. These were their largest RPO cars. These were only used on the westbound North Coast Limited. They were not, and then they returned to Chicago on either the Empire Builder or the Twin City Zephyr. But it was a working RPO in Chicago, and here we've got the North Coast Limited at Ferry. I believe this is Ferry Builder. I like the freight in the center siding. And then another thing that's pretty interesting to point out, these are two of the EA booster helping to power this train. And if you have the latest edition of First and Fastest, there's an article about Rochelle, and there's a picture of the North Coast Limited in there, and it's the same configuration. It wasn't the same E unit. I did check, but E unit and then the two EA boosters powering the train. Here we are now near East Dubuque. This is August 1960. There's our RPO again behind the power. And here we are approaching the depot in East Dubuque. This is May 1965. East Dubuque again. This is the rear of the train. This is July 1961. A couple interesting things to note in this photo. First is the red light attached to the coupler. This was something the Q added on its line for the North Coast Limited because there was no red light above the door. So that was taken off and hung on every North Coast Limited that came in. And then also just ahead of that observation car is one of the Q's blunt end cars off the Kansas City Zephyr, most likely. So not sure why it was in the consist this day. Could be for a tour group, or could be providing parlor car service, but that seems to be a bit more of an unusual occurrence. Here we are in Savannah looking off the US 52 bridge. And then originally I thought that stainless car behind the water baggage car and RPO was the Q's RPO, but then I remembered that the slumber coach was up there. And so that really broke the appearance of the lowy two-tone green there. You just all of a sudden have this one stainless car. Now we'll head down to river level. I'm thinking this was one of the, there was an excursion occurring this day, given all the people up on the bridge. There's probably a steam train coming eastbound at this point. And I'll wrap up our coverage of the North Coast Limited here, crossing the Milwaukee Road at Savannah. And then we've got a Q parlor car just ahead of that observation car on this day. So now we'll take a look at the Empire Builder, Seattle, Portland, Chicago via the SPNS, GN, and the CB&Q. Back to our trusty summer 1960 timetable. Empire Builder on the Q was number 31 and 32. westbound leaving Chicago at 2 p.m., arriving Minneapolis just after 9:30. And then 32 eastbound leaving Minneapolis at 6:30 in the morning and getting Chicago at 2 p.m. Now, note the train left Chicago at 2 p.m. and the eastbound arrived in Chicago at 2 p.m. So there was, I believe, 5 sets that rotated in the service. So there was one that laid over in Chicago for the night and was ready to go for the next morning. Because while the queue did have some pretty fast turnaround times, especially for the Twin Cities Zephyr, no time at all wasn't exactly going to work. So taking a look at one of our consists here, this is the westbound arriving at St. Paul in August 1962. Again, an amplified consist. The World's Fair is going on in Seattle still at this point. We've got our Q parlor car down there at the end for the first class traffic for Chicago and St. Paul. And again, this was this car was being used as a tour group for a tour group today, and they were going to be transferring over to sleepers on the Winnipeg Limited. So this is a car schematic of the Great Dome Empire Builder. So this would have been from 1955 on, after the domes and the Great Dome lounges were built. So we've got our shorts coach up there at the top. This was for all the local traffic. That if you weren't riding from one end to the other long distances, you were in the short coach. And then you had, usually on a typical consist, 3 dome coaches, followed by the ranch car, and then the dining car. And the Great Dome Lounge was located behind the dining car. This was the full-length dome car, and then they had the lounge area on the lower level of the car. And then you had your block of sleepers in different configurations, and then the tail car at the end. And the Empire Builder was a pretty interesting train in that it was basically redone 3 times in only about 7 or 8 years. You had the initial edition coming along in 1947, then you had almost completely re-equipped again in 1950 as the mid-century Empire Builder, and then 55 they got the domes, and then the older cars that were replaced, which really weren't that old, that went to their secondary train, the Western Star. So we'll start taking a look at our pictures here. This is departing St. Paul, and then we've got our QRPO. This is going to be eastbound. And again, this is Silver Page or Silver Post. This is Silver Post this day. And that's the Q's highest numbered unit on the point of the train. That's the E9, 9995. Here we are at St. Paul, departing. And then it's interesting in this photo that the GNRPO remained in the consist. That didn't happen a lot prior to the mid 1960s, but after that, until the mail contracts came off, it eventually did run through. This was to give more time to originally they swapped out the RPOs at St. Paul to give the RPO crews more time to start sorting mail. And here we are at Prescott. This is eastbound from the depot. This would have just gone across the St. Croix River Bridge, which I do have a photo of here coming up later. But the depot's gone now. There is still a parking lot down here, and you can, the buildings downtown haven't really changed all that much, but looks quite a bit different today. And here we are at Winona Junction. This is on the east side of the Mississippi, just across the river from Winona. And I like to point out the Q bus here on the right. So the Q had a depot in downtown Winona, and you'd go to the depot there, and then they'd put you on the bus, take you across the river, and then you'd get on your train at this little depot. And this is right off the overpass And the road down to the tracks is still there. It's called the Depot Street, I believe, but all these buildings are gone. And then, I was talking with Mike when we were going through this presentation before, and he reminded me that the track went down to single track right up here across the Green Bay and Western. And then there's our RPO in the consist as well. And here we are at Prairie du Chien. This is eastbound. Really cool image here. This is Portage Junction. This is circa 1968, 1970, somewhere in there. We're starting to get big sky blue appearing, but we do still have Empire Builder colors as well. And so this is taken from the tower here at Portage Junction. If you look up on the river bluff there on the side, you can see the code line coming down. That's the Illinois Central's line across northern Illinois and then into Iowa, coming down the bluff. And it'll join up with the Q down here and make their, well, the Q ran over IC trackage. It was joint between Portage Junction here and East Dubuque, and that's where it branched off and went through the tunnel and then curved out and went right onto the bridge over the river. And then beyond the bridge back here, that's the Galena River. And then the Chicago Great Western came in back there. This is just down from the Winston Tunnel. And then the Q also had a branch that came off here, went up the Galena River into Galena. But just a really cool photo. I found this one on eBay, and just a lot of cool things to see in this one. And this is the Q's silver parlor. The Q had two parlor cars, silver parlor and silver chair, and these were added to the westbound, Empire Builder consist to provide, parlor car service to Chicago St. Paul passengers. And most times this came back on the next day's morning Zephyr. Now we'll take a look on board the train. Here we are in one of the dome coaches. Notice all the Native American motif. Now we're downstairs in the lounge area, the Great Dome Lounge. Just such vibrant colors. Everything seems kind of drab in comparison today. And then a couple people are smoking in there. That's something you don't see anymore either. Now we're upstairs in the Great Dome Lounge. Then I've got a couple builders photos here of one of the tail cars. These were the Cooley series cars, I believe, and they had or the Mountain series rather. They had the very large windows along the rear end of the car. And I'm guessing these are builders photos based on the fact that there's a fence in the background here. So this is probably fresh out of the factory. And they had models or employees come out to take these photos. Bottle of Coke sitting on the end table there. There's a route map on the back of the wall, and then there were on the pillars between the windows there were states. The states that the train passed through were on there, the state outlines, and then I believe it was the state flowers that were the picture in the middle of the state. And there's just a closer up view of that. And I grew up in Illinois. That the western border there of Illinois along the Mississippi, it looks a little funky in that picture. It looks like they took some liberty there. All right, now we'll start moving into the Q's passenger trains themselves. Starting off with the 1937 version of the Twin City Zephyr, Chicago to Minneapolis, St. Paul via Savannah. Not a dome train, but still a really cool train. And if you've ever been to the Illinois Railway Museum, you've most likely ridden the Nebraska Zephyr. This is one of those train sets. So this was actually the train set that got me into the Q. This and the Pioneer Zephyr. So they originally started with the small articulated set, and that was 1935, 1936, can't remember off the top of my head. And they quickly realized that it just wasn't big enough for the amount of traffic that was on this line. So, within a year or two, they moved on to these 7-car articulated train sets. And while they were bigger, going the articulated route was probably not the best choice because traffic continued to grow. And with an articulated train set, you're pretty limited as to what you can do to expand capacity. And then also, if there was a problem in one of the cars, the whole train set is out of service. So the Q did that with their first couple train sets, then they figured it out, and they went to individual cars from that point on. So just a couple advertising photos here. Just really cool, streamlined trains. I mean, how can you not like these? And it's interesting here, this ad says 8-car twin Zephyrs. There are only 7, so I don't know if maybe they were considering the power one of those 8 cars. I'm not sure, but 7-car train. So we had the power car at the front, Zephyrus or Pegasus, and then we had the cocktail lounge next. This was the front half of the car was the auxiliary generators to provide power for the train. And then you had a small baggage express section there. And then you had the cocktail lounge afterwards. The Q did rebuild that car later in its life and into just coach service. And that's how the train or the set at IRM remains today, with just the coach seats up there, but I think they use it more as storage at this point. Then you had 2 coaches, dinette coach, added a couple more, or added 4 more tables adjacent to the dining car so they could serve more people. And then you had the parlor car and then the parlor lounge at the end. And when these cars were, or when this train was eventually moved on to the Nebraska Zephyr service, over time it ended up losing 2 of the cars. They removed the dinette coach and the parlor car and made it a 5-car consist. And eventually they took the kitchen area out of the dining car and they put vending machines in there. So it wasn't quite as glamorous there towards the end. We'll start diving into the photos. This is the train leaving Minneapolis, crossing the Stone Arch Bridge. Got the flour mills in the background. And this is, shot basically from the other side of the bridge. Now we're still leaving Minneapolis. Here we are on the platforms at St. Paul Union Depot. This is departing St. Paul. This is departing St. Paul once again. We'll have a couple more pictures later from this same vantage point. This was Kellogg Street, and this bridge is still there. And during the summer, the sun swings around enough for late afternoon, evening trains. You can get good light on the westbounds. So you'll see a whole bunch of rail fans camped up there during the summer months. But that's the Great Northern Roundhouse on the right that serviced their passenger power. Here's a publicity photo. I believe this was from Alma, Wisconsin. Everybody's out to check out the new train. Then the depot there on the left is one of the standard CB&N designs, which a few of those still exist. They're not next to the tracks for the most part, I don't think, but they've been moved off the right of way. This is approaching La Crosse. This is just north of La Crosse. And here we see that problem. You need extra capacity for the train. You have to add them to the front. Well, there's no passenger access through the baggage area and the power generator section of the car. So people up front couldn't pass to the rear of the train. So I don't know what they did for dining service, or if there was somebody that brought up snacks and meals. And now we're in St. Paul, or excuse me, La Crosse proper, on the street running trackage down 2nd Street. This was their depot before they built the one on the east side of downtown at the base of Grandad Bluff. This is 2nd and Pearl Streets. And this is the area behind the train now where the depot was and the freight house, and that's the parking lot for the Holiday Inn. We are arriving into La Crosse. See the depot on the left behind the train. Again there at 2nd and Pearl. And trains continued to stop here until 1940. That's when the new depot on the freight cutoff was built and opened for service. And most of this trackage is gone now. BNSF still accesses the south end of the line to service City Brewery, the former Heilman Old Style Brewery. And I think there might be a little spur off the north end that the Milwaukee, now CP, has access to. But driving down the street today, it's kind of hard to imagine the Q's passenger trains going through there. Now we've got the westbound twin pulling into East Dubuque. This photo is at speed near DeSoto, Wisconsin. Again, looks like we've got some extra cars up towards the head end of the consist. I don't have a location on this one, but it's somewhere along the river. This is still in Wisconsin, most likely, not into Illinois. And we'll step on board the train. And if you've ever ridden the Nebraska Zephyr at IRM, it still looks pretty similar to this today. And this is back in the parlor observation car with the swiveling seats. If you've ever seen the movie A League of Their Own, they had the scene in the back of the train here, and then getting on the train into this car. So a lot of history with this train.